Okay, so welcome to the Emotional Resiliency Masterclass, How to Respond Rather Than React Through Own Your Identity. My name is Jason Mellard, I'm a certified high-performance coach, and I'm so glad you're here today. I picked this topic because it's something that I really needed right now, and I'm so grateful to be speaking about it with you. I'm in the trenches with you, and I say that because I want everyone to know that this is about progress and not perfection. When we decide that it's okay to be just where we are, it takes a lot of the pressure off in life. And we don't have to think that we need to put on some kind of mask or play some role. We're going to make this experiential. And I want you to write in the chat, what is kind of one thing that you would like to get out of this masterclass today? And as you're doing that, I want to talk a little bit about what emotional triggers are. So when you feel a strong emotion, it could be triggered by just about anything. It could be maybe the tone of somebody's voice, an event, a memory, and often those are just immediate. I can give you an example in my life. One of the biggest changes in my marriage is when I decided to look at my wife's complaints towards me as something that was allowing me to know her better. So she would come and say, Jason, the house is a mess, the kids are going crazy, and I don't know, I don't feel close to you. And most of my marriage, I would get this just big emotional response to that and get defensive about it. And, when I looked at, gosh, what is really the story behind that? I felt like, man, I'm not enough. And I realized that, instead of it being about me and me maybe triggering back to some time in my life where I always felt I could never measure up, I decided to make that about allowing me to know her more. I married her to know her more and to be able to serve her. And however she shows up with me is an opportunity to do that. And so changing that story really allowed me to respond differently emotionally. And so now when she comes towards me, when I get home from work and I can tell she's frazzled, I'm ready to receive whatever it is that she has to give and whatever tone of voice that is. And it's so nice to know that I'm not going to have this strong trigger to that emotion. It could be that you're just on the internet and all of a sudden an image of an attractive guy comes on the screen. If you go and listen to my podcast episode called Be Curious, you'll see how I processed some of my emotions that came up when that happened with me and went back and thought about, gosh, what were the thoughts that were just running through my mind without me even realizing it? And we can decide to act with intention rather than to react. So the more awareness that we have of what our triggers are, and the more we understand our patterns of response and how we want to show up, the more that we can train ourselves over time and stay regulated. So a little bit about the science of emotional triggers. How this was all really interesting. And maybe you guys have heard some of these terms before. So this thing called the amygdala is it's a small piece of the brain that is in charge of the fight and flight response. So, my wife would come towards me, not looking very happy, and all of a sudden I would get my defenses up. And that just happened in an instant. That thing, if we're not careful, can take over. But what we want to, and what we'll learn throughout this course tonight, is how we can get back into the driver's seat and start acting with intention, which is what our prefrontal cortex is in charge of. That's where we can regulate our body, we can think more rationally. And when we understand that that first big response typically only lasts between 60 and 90 seconds, then we can kind of chill out a little bit and say, okay, I can get in the driver's seat. I don't have to attach myself to this big emotional reaction or this trigger. I can start getting a little bit curious. Then that allows us to be more intentional in how we respond. The role of memory, a lot of times when we have a big response to something, it is triggered back to an experience in our life. Implicit memory, our memory that we don't even remember, that we have an emotional attachment to, even though we don't even remember that situation or that scene that happened. But our body internally kept that score, if you've read that book, and it reacts as if that's happening again. An explicit memory is a memory that we can recall and we are able to dissect a little bit, but we can all of a sudden, get triggered back into a memory and we're responding as our younger self did back then. Mirror neurons are parts of our brain that, when I see my wife come towards me and she's not doing really well and she's stressed, I can take on that stress if I'm not careful. I have to be aware that I can catch the mood that she's in. I can look at her facial expressions and what is going on, and I can reflect that back if I'm not careful. Now, honestly, that's one of the reasons that porn is so appealing, is because we get to feel what they're feeling. We get to be in that scene with them in a sense. And that's how that works, is through mirror neurons. But when I can decide that I'm the one that wants to portray something different, when I want to make a mark on the world, then I can believe that I'm able to inspire other people who are around me and start to switch the cycle there. Cortisol is the stress hormone. And again, that can flood our body. And if we're not careful and we don't regulate, that can start to take over. But it's important to realize that those hormones, those chemicals that come and flood our body, whether it's cortisol or adrenaline, again, they can wash over us, but they last for about 60 to 90 seconds. And if we can just wait for that amount of time without freaking out, then that allows us to act more intentionally. So for example, there would be times where I would be triggered by something somebody said, or maybe just a bad day at work. And I would get in what I called the gray zone, where I just felt like strong emotion and all these things were, flooding through my body. And the only thing that seemed to make sense at the time was to look at porn. I'm thinking there's just no other thing that would make sense to do right now except to look at porn. But I knew that, hey, if I waited 90 seconds, then I'm going to be able to consider some other options more easily. And I really did train my mind to do that. And it was really helpful. And then neuroplasticity is something that scientists have found that really gives a lot of hope, I think, because we can rewire our brain. Just like I said with my wife, I pretty much rewired my brain to get excited about her coming towards me in whatever way she decides to express herself. And I believe that we can do that in many different areas of our life as well. With pornography, for example, for me, I have associated so much pain with looking at porn that I don't want to move towards that. And I've associated so much pleasure with doing something else with my time and energy that I've rewired my brain not to be drawn towards that as an option as much as it used to be. Still am on guard in a healthy way, but it's nice not to be so motivated towards that. And then I want to talk a little bit about the nuance between emotions and feelings. So when we talk about an emotion, I like to use the definition of it's that immediate response to a trigger. A feeling is something that we have after the emotion based on what we tell ourselves about that emotional response and that trigger. So for example, I can get super scared because somebody is coming towards me and I think they're going to judge me and be mad at me. And so all of a sudden I just get super scared. Maybe it's aligning with a memory or just a pattern of thinking and belief. But I can tell myself, it's going to be all right. I've got this. We're going to work on this, whatever is going to happen. It's going to be okay. God's got my back. And so I can decide that I'm going to be courageous in response to that emotion of fear. I'm going to feel courage, even though I had a strong fear come up. But what you don't want to do is to get scared of the fear. And so then that emotion of fear is going to last longer and become a feeling that doesn't dissipate as long. Feelings stay with us longer. So we need to be careful what we tell ourselves. For example, if an attractive guy is jogging down the street with his shirt off, and maybe I feel shame overwhelms me because I've been thinking poorly about my body throughout my life. And that's one of the things that just automatically happens when I see an attractive guy, perhaps. So I can feel that shame, but I don't have to tell myself, man, I can't believe you just shamed yourself again after seeing that guy, man. And then I'm going to have a feeling of shame that's going to last longer. But I can say, oh, there's that guy, there's that shame. I'm going to choose to be hopeful that I can enjoy the next thing in my day. And I can choose the feeling. Can't always choose the emotion that's immediate. And then there's the story. So when I think about my wife coming towards me, I tell myself the story in that split second of I'm not enough, that I'm not the husband I need to be. And that story is actually the thing that I'm reacting to. It's not necessarily her. And so I changed my story, like I said, to say I get to know my wife more through this interaction that we're going to have. Because it's not necessarily the trigger that is leading to the big response. It's the story we're telling ourselves about it. Maybe it's a story that we've replayed over and over in our life. It's a story that happened. but there's something else there that we're reacting to more than the thing itself. Can y'all relate to that? Do you ever tell yourself a story in your head and it just makes the emotion bigger? Maybe put a one in the chat if you can relate to that. So I want to use SSA as an example of what I'm talking about here. So let's say you have this big SSA sensation that shows up in your body. It could be, a strong romantic feeling towards a guy. It could be, I've described it as this feeling of electricity that's come through my body before, a little pop behind the eyes, whatever. You kind of know what I'm talking about. And when this first started happening to me when I was young, I freaked out. And I learned over time, though, that I wasn't actually freaking out over the sensation itself. I was freaking out over the story that I told myself about the sensation. So all of a sudden, I felt separate from guys most of my life. And now I have this thing, which most guys don't have, the sensation that just came up. And so this means I'm even more separate. Maybe this means that I'm gay. And all those things are really bad. So then I freak out. Or maybe, you see an image pop onto your screen and you're like, oh, crap. I'm going to lose the temptation. I've, fallen every time I've seen this image and it's going to happen again. Then you're putting more energy towards that experience that you're having rather than saying, hey, God's got me. I can choose my next response. You can tell yourself a different story to take the energy out of the trigger, out of the image that pops up, out of the sensation that could be coming through your body. So you could have a neutral reaction if you start to see your SSA sensations as just what they are. Like, oh, okay, I had this feeling come through my body. I had this romantic pull all of a sudden towards this guy I was talking to at church. Okay, I don't have to, not care about it. I can be aware of it, but I can just acknowledge it. Hey, this is sensation in my body. It's an experience that I'm having. And then maybe you could decide that the story is, oh, okay, I'm observing this sensation. I wonder what it has to tell me. Maybe I'm feeling lonely right now and I'm having more of a pull towards this guy because, I don't know, I just want a friend. I've got friends, but right now I just don't feel like I have a friend that's close to me. And, maybe that's part of what's going on. So we can get a little bit more curious about what it has to tell us. Then that can actually be part of our personal growth. That's one of the things, if you followed me, that I'm big on. Like, hey, we've got this thing. Let's use it for our personal development, our growth to draw us closer to God and to other people. Then here you go. Maybe it's an opportunity for growth and connection. Maybe this is, I've got this, again, this romantic feeling that came up towards this guy at church. This is an opportunity that I get to talk to my mentor about this and connect with him and process through it. Because he said, man, Jason, always give me a call if something like this comes up. Love to chat with you about it. And so all of a sudden then I have this emotion towards this guy and I can get a little bit excited because the story I'm telling myself is this is a chance for me to connect with my mentor later this afternoon. And I can share the story with him about my interaction with this guy at church and some of the things that I feel like it has to tell me. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of work together today. I want you to write down 2 to 3 situations where you felt triggered recently. It could be in any sphere in life. I shared an SSA example. I shared an example with my wife. And think about what emotions did you feel? And then what story were you telling yourself? So I'm going to take a little bit of time for this, for you guys to do this. And if you want to put it in the chat, feel free to do that. I'm going to participate in this with you. So I'm going to take some time to write this down in the chat for myself while you guys are doing this work. Because, if we don't do it, if we're just listening, we're not going to remember this stuff as much. It's not going to be as impactful. Let's do this together. Okay, so I put one in the chat. So today, I was feeling down today because, I set a boundary with a friend a while back, and we just hadn't talked since then. I don't know. It's made me sad that he hasn't reached out. And as I was thinking about it today, it reminded me of when I was a kid and I would say to my dad, hey, I don't like it when you do this. And he would touch me in places that I didn't want him to. And I would ask him to stop. And then he would say, okay, whatever, Jason, I'm not even going to hug. Let's not touch at all. And that's not what happened with this friend, but it kind of triggered me back to that experience as a kid where, I asked for a boundary with my dad and then all of a sudden it was no connection. I'm going to keep you at a distance. You're too much. And so I think that I've paralleled this experience with my friend to that. And so part of what I'm feeling in response to my friend not reaching back out, that loneliness and that sadness has been, because of that experience with my dad. And that's been an opportunity for me to dive deeper. When I talk about growth opportunities, I'm able to sit and process that and talk to a mentor today. I talked to him during lunch, and it was so nice to be able to just go back to that and say, hey, here's an opportunity to kind of dive deeper into that experience with my dad when I was growing up and to grieve a little bit of that. And sometimes I was able to talk to him and process it. And we got to the place where, I'm grieving something that happened that I didn't want to happen, but I can also grieve what I wish happened. It could have been different, or he could have reached out between then and now. So it was an opportunity to feel seen and heard by my mentor and for me to grieve and to feel some emotion. That's always a positive thing when we do that in a healthy way. I think anytime we can choose to grieve something, we're going to get stronger on the other side of it. I'm going to take a minute here just to read these comments. John says, I'm thinking of a time recently that I was triggered by a dude in the gym. That happens a lot, huh? Emotion, felt blown away by his physique. Story I was telling myself, not sure. I guess I was envious or even lustful. Yeah. I used to feel so different from the guys at the gym because I had put them on a pedestal. And I would tell myself the story maybe that I'm never going to be like them because they're bigger and stronger. They have more value than I do. I can work as hard as I want, but I'll never measure up or get to where I feel like I need to be in order to accept myself and be of value. I didn't even realize I was thinking those things until I sat down and took time to get curious about it. Because when I would say those things out loud, that I need to be bigger and stronger to have as much value as that man, it sounds a little bit silly. I mean, I know I have as much value if I say God created me in his image and he has good things prepared for me. But yet in the moment, I really do think if I was bigger and stronger, I would have more value. Maybe I would just be bigger and stronger and I would have different things to offer. But now when I go to the gym, I can get inspired by the guy that's bigger and stronger. And the story I tell myself is, man, he's really worked hard. And it's kind of cool that if I decide that I am interested in putting that much dedication and energy into lifting heavy and eating what I would need to, I could look something like that. That could be really fun. I used to look at the guy that was skinnier than me and think I was better than him. It kind of worked the other way too. But now I can look at the guy that's skinnier than me, which there aren't too many, but I can get excited for and inspired by him because, yeah, when you go into the gym and you just haven't been there and you're starting out from the beginner standpoint, then it takes a lot of faith and courage to just say, hey, I'm going to show up every day believing that my body's going to change. And then I feel less separate from any of the guys that are there. And that helps me not to have as much of a reaction, even an SSA type of reaction. Let's see. Larry says, woke up depressed. I felt sadness, but also some hope that God had a purpose. I was telling myself that I'd messed up my life too much. Yeah. It's easy to look back on our past and allow that to inform who we say that we are and what's possible for our future. That can be one of the biggest discouragements in life is if we look at our future and decide that there's not as much there as we would like to be, not as much possibility. And because we screwed up somehow in our past and now my life is, running out, the clock's running. But man, if we change the story and say, gosh, the best is yet to come, and God's going to use every bit of my past to fuel my future. And my past is not wasted. And I can look back on it without telling myself shameful things about myself and looking at the past. So if you look at your past and it's such a burden and it just weighs you down, and then it's going to be hard to show up fully in the present with greater energy, which is what is really required to do great stuff that's going to make the future even better. John says, I was triggered by a potential employee I interviewed today. He was a 22-year-old young man who played football and baseball in college, very confident, good looking. I was afraid he could sense something gay in me. I totally get you there. I was afraid I would try too hard to have a connection in order to reassure myself, and that would make him feel uncomfortable. The story I told myself is that something is wrong with me. Other people can see it when they look at me. Being able to put that on paper is incredibly empowering and So helpful. When we get something out on paper, that reinforces the fact that it's not us. We are the person that's observing our thoughts. We're not our thoughts. And so I can be aware of all the thoughts, all the stories going around in my head without allowing them to mean anything about me. All these things are just maybe patterns of thinking. They're inspired by some challenges, maybe experiences I had with athletic guys in high school. And I acknowledge that I want to be liked and I want to make a difference in life, in other people's lives. Yeah. Thank you guys for your honesty. This is awesome. So we're going to talk about the power of pausing. So I talked about you have the trigger, then you have the emotion that happens, and in between there is the story that your brain is making up in a split second. That is really what's causing that big emotion. But then the pause can happen after the emotion, and you get to talk to yourself instead of just listening to yourself. And that's when you can decide how you want to show up. That's when you can decide how you want to feel. But to get to that place where we can pause after that big emotion so that we can talk truth to ourselves, we can listen to God's voice, so we can choose how we want to feel, takes some tools. And we're going to talk about those right now. So we're going to try this breathing technique together. It's called the 4-7-8 breathing technique, where you breathe in for 4 counts, you hold for 7 counts, and then you release for 8. So we'll do this twice. So go ahead and start. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 7. And release your breath for 8 counts. And repeat. Yeah. So what we're doing in that moment is we're telling our fight or flight amygdala part of our brain that it's going to be okay. We're activating the part of us that is able to act with more intention. Another thing that you can do that we're not going to do here on this call, but you could Google it, body scan. And you really just quiet yourself and you become aware of kind of what's going on in your body. And you start from your head, just think about, what am I sensing on top of my head? And you move down to your neck. Does it feel tight? My shoulders feel heavy? Does my chest feel open or closed? Your stomach, and you go to your back, working from the top down. Your legs, do they feel like lead? Your feet. And that really helps to ground you in the present. A lot of what these tools are right here are getting us back into the present. Because when we get in that fight and flight mode, all of a sudden we've zoomed into the future and we've imagined a future that's really dim and gloomy because of whatever big emotional response we had to a trigger. I didn't get the promotion at work. So, I'm never going to get the promotion. I'll never be moving up and as successful as I want to be. We can make up this huge story for the next 20 years in a matter of half a second. But I just want to get back to the present. And this is a good way to do that. And it's a way that we can honor ourselves too. Say, hey, I'm important. And I really like this one. I just learned about this recently. It seems pretty simple. I'm not sure why I wasn't taught this as a kid, but this is great. Okay, so let's do this one together. Look around you and name 5 different things that you can see with your eyes. And then you're going to name 4 different things that you can touch. So right now I'm touching this desk, my feet are touching the floor, my legs are on my chair. Now I guess I can actively touch the microphone. But again, that's grounding me in the present. 3 things that you can hear. It's really quiet, but I hear my son talking in the other room, or maybe it's the TV going, which could perhaps be Blue's Clues, or this guy on YouTube who plays Minecraft called Preston. Can't decide whose voice that is. Maybe hear some crickets outside. I hear my own breath. That's always one. And 2 things that you can smell, and then 1 thing you can taste. And you can mix that up how you would like. But I think that's a really fun, creative way because it doesn't just ground us into our senses. It also forces us to answer a question. I'm asking myself, what are 5 things that I can see? So I'm needing to use that prefrontal cortex part of my brain to be able to see and think and answer that question. So I'm getting out of that automatic response part of my brain and getting into the intentional part of it, if that makes sense. Another tool that I'd include in here that is suggested to me one time is, if I feel like I have this strong urge to look at porn or to just yell out in anger, is to give myself a math problem. Say, okay, what's 12 times 23? I don't think I could do that in my head, but something that you can do in your head and that just all of a sudden changes the gear into you being more in charge. Then name it to tame it. So name the emotion. Y'all did a great job doing that in the chat here. But when you're able to say, I'm sad or I'm lonely, but then if you can get more specific, even that's more helpful. So I'm not just angry, I'm like really frustrated or I'm really stressed, because when you decide to kind of get more specific with the emotion, the name of it, then again, that's just another opportunity to use the analytical part of your brain to think, okay, what are the other types of emotions that are more specific? And, am I feeling more frustrated, or is it more just fed up? Whatever it is, annoyed. Then again, that gets you just kind of being curious. It's a good opportunity as well. Okay, reframe. I like this picture. But this is kind of, what story do I want to tell myself? And so I could, reframe, my wife coming towards me as an opportunity rather than a defeat, an inevitable defeat, and something that was going to tell me I'm not enough. And again, that's rewriting the story, like, hey, this is an opportunity. Like, just a really quick reframe. And you can reset with gratitude. Gratitude is super powerful. And gratitude and fear, like, it just can't be in the same place at the same time. Gratitude and anger, it's really hard for those two things to be in the same place at the same time. Gratitude and shame. So when you start being grateful and speaking those things out, it's going to crowd out some of those things that you don't want, that aren't serving you any purpose. And I understand that maybe some of these can feel like I'm just faking it, like, all right, whatever, what's the story that I want to tell myself that's more true or going to be positive? What am I grateful for? And in the moment you feel like, well, is that lying? Am I lying to myself because I'm really just pissed off? But you're not, because also your healthy self on his best day is really grateful, does believe better things. And so you can honor the part of yourself that is really pissed off and just feeling frustrated and angry. But you can also invite your better self in and do what that person would do at that time. Okay, and that's actually going to lead into this slide. So if you want to take what you put in the chat before and continue with that. So I put in the chat about my friend who didn't reach out to me. So today that affected me. And I could ask myself, I can honor where I'm at. I don't have to rush to get out of this feeling or this place, but I can also invite the best version of me into this moment. Jason that is living, abiding in the vine, and asking for the Spirit's guidance. What would that person say in this moment? Who is that? Kind of think about what that Jason looks like. And then what's the outcome that I want here? I can think about what the outcome is that I would really like with reconciliation with my friend in that relationship. Or I could just think about the outcome that I want for the rest of the day. That, I want to have more to give to the folks on this call and to my family. And I want to use this as an opportunity to be more authentic on this call tonight. That was one of the outcomes that I wanted from this. Then how can I respond to the situation with empathy and clarity? I can have empathy for myself. Like I said, I can honor myself that was sad and was triggered. I can have empathy towards the other person and say, hey, they're doing the best they can. And then I can be more clear about what it is that I want to do next. I want to choose how I show up in my relationships. And this gives me an opportunity to get more clear on who Jason is and how Jason wants to be in friendships and relationships. Again, I really want to hit home on this. We can see everything as an opportunity. We don't have to force that. We don't have to tell ourselves that right away, but we can know that, once I kind of move past this strong emotion, or I've slept on this, then I know that I'll be able to look back and see this as an opportunity to grow. So me feeling sad and lonely today, like I said, was an opportunity for me to just share more of myself with my mentor that I talked to during lunch today. It allowed me to be a bit more authentic with you on this call. It allowed me to have a conversation with God about it. It was great. So Larry says, the best version of me would be one who accepts the temptations and tribulation that Jesus said we would experience. The outcome is joy and peace in spite of the inner challenges, sometimes turmoil. I can choose to give myself grace and call out to God to fill me with his Holy Spirit so that the fruit of the Spirit comes out. That's beautiful. And what could be a next step to that, Larry, is say, okay, well, what does that mean in the next 5 minutes? The rest of the evening. How can I do something practical to act on that intention and that truth? John says, this young fella has many of the same insecurities that I have. I don't need to covet his physique or his looks. One tool that I use when I see an attractive guy that maybe I could feel intimidated by is I start off in my mind saying, he reminds me of, or his strength reminds me of the strength that I have. The strength that he has reminds me of the strength that I have. And I remember when I went into my boss's office and said, hey, I know you said this and made this decision, but I really want to see if you can reconsider. And that was me showing up with strength and confidence. And so my strength may not look like benching 285 pounds, but have as much strength. And the strength that I can see visually with him can remind me of the strength that shows up in actions for me. Okay, so that's really triggers in the moment and how we can get more clarity and ownership of those. But how do we sustain growth? This is something that you can do at the end of the day. When did I handle my emotions well today? When did I let them get the best of me? What can I learn from that? So what I recommend is after this masterclass, for the next week, pay extra attention to your emotions. And when you have a big emotion come up, a big response to something, pause, practice one or two of these tools and put something down on your phone in the moment about what it was that you were seeing or experiencing. Just maybe a few notes so that you can come back later in the evening and ask some of these questions. Think about what was the sensation that was really going on in your body. And gratitude, again, not just in the moment, but how can we make this a practice? So at the end of this masterclass, if you shoot me an email at hello@jasonmeller.com, I'll give you my morning and evening journal prompts that include gratitude and some other things as well. It's important not just to list them out, but to really feel them, to integrate them. We can so easily imagine the worst and think back to the harmful things in life, but it's equally as powerful to really feel the things that we're grateful for. And also along those lines is the idea of visualizing a better outcome. So this could be, I'm at the gym one day and I'm observing myself getting an envious or lustful thought or just comparing myself and feeling less than, whatever. But I've decided I'm going to continue going to this gym. And so maybe that evening, I'm going to visualize going to the gym and pre-deciding how I'm going to show up and imagine myself walking in to the gym, excited to see this guy and to practice that weird tool that Jason told me, which was he reminds me of, or this part of him, aspect of him reminds me of this aspect of me. Here's an example of that. And just picture yourself doing that in your mind. And then also visualize how you would feel afterwards. I think God gives us an imagination and we need to use it. I love that. And then we can bring Jesus into the picture. You can picture Jesus walking into that gym with you if you'd like to, knowing that I have all the strength in the world. I have all the wisdom in the world. I am more than enough in Christ, right? And that can be a helpful tool as well. But then also visualize your future. Visualize, what it is that you see yourself doing. Before I started coaching, before I started doing a call like this, I pictured myself sitting here doing it so that when I did it the first time, I felt like I had already done it. Honestly, I felt like, well, of course I'll be able to do that because I did it already in my head. And I don't know if y'all have practiced doing that before, but it really is powerful. One of the things in my coaching course, I have the guys write out journal entries from the perspective of themselves 6 months, a year, and 5 years from the present. And to say, okay, this is what happened on this day. Wow, I got reconnected with my wife. I lost 20 pounds over the last year. I'm so proud of that. And I'm feeling so much better about life. And it's really an amazing tool. If y'all want, I can send you my Google Doc link of those journal entries that I did. I sat down at a coffee shop January 1st of 2024. If you'd like that, kind of read through how I did that exercise, but it's really powerful. Mindfulness and meditation. Here's a simple one that I like to do is just take a verse from the Bible and memorize it or have it in front of me and just read it a few times. Let it sink in. God calls us to meditate on his word. And then sit and just kind of be aware of what thoughts come into my head. Some are totally distracting thoughts like, what am I going to have for lunch? Or maybe it's, image of an attractive guy pops into my head. Or maybe it's an inspired thought about what I hope to accomplish this day or week or year. Or maybe, it's the Spirit I feel like really communicating something to me. Or, how can I listen for God's voice? So I really like that one. Super simple as a way to integrate the word, hearing God's voice. But then also, just paying attention and just being aware of all the other random thoughts that are coming through our head. And let me discern your voice in it and be here right next to me in this time. Let that be more real than all these other thoughts. And last slide in this section, set the intention. So we talked about setting an intention in the moment of, okay, this is my best self and how he would show up, what he would want the outcome to be, and what he wants to do next. What's your intention for the week? What's your intention for the day? And one of the things I want you to do, go ahead and you can put this in the chat. What are the 3 words that describe how you want to show up each day? So I have an alarm that goes off on my phone at 10 o'clock each morning that says joy, aliveness, and gratitude. And that reminds me of how I want to show up. I want to show up grateful, joyous, and alive. And so I pre-decided those things, and it reminds me, it's just a silent alarm. And so that's your homework for this, is to put a silent alarm on your phone with those 3 words that are the intention of the energy that you want to give. What do you want to show up as with the people around you? Just like we talked about with the mirror neurons. I want people to catch aliveness from being around me. I want them to feel more alive. I want them to feel more joyful. And I can set that intention. Every time I walk into my office from the parking garage, I say, I'm a happy man ready to serve. And it's a little bit cheesy, but I got that from another mentor of mine. And I don't know, it just kind of sets the intention. It says, I'm walking through this doorway to come into my office, and I'm a happy man ready to serve. Sometimes I don't feel like it. I'm not happy. I'm upset. And I'll say, I'm a happy man ready to serve. But I say it anyway, because I know that on my best day, that's who I really am. And so I can let that influence how I show up. Confident, honest, considerate, hopeful, helpful, and positive, energetic, mindful of others. Yeah, that's awesome. Joy, confidence, thankfulness, surrendered to God. Wow, I love that. I read those 3 things, aware of God, worship in my heart, and surrendered to God. I just feel like the presence of God enveloping you, it's kind of wrapping around you. One of the visualization exercises we do in my group coaching program is to imagine that we're waking up in the Garden of Eden. And what would that feel like to be in that perfect place and have God's presence so tangible? Sometimes I like to picture myself walking around in a bubble of the Garden of Eden, kind of taking a little bit of the Garden of Eden with me wherever I am. God's presence here, just incredible beauty, perfect creation, perfect vulnerability and authenticity. I picture that around me sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to run through a little bit about my coaching. I like to look at this group coaching owner identity program as embarking on a hero's journey towards a life of purpose and possibility. And we will arm ourselves with the belief that what God says about us is true. That's big. And we're going to sharpen our skills of gratitude, mindfulness, and imagination. We talked about a lot of that tonight. And I'll guide you to honor your story, voice your longings, and honor the boy whose longings were dismissed or tainted. And together, as a group of 5 to 7 guys, we're going to feel the pain, grieve losses, and revisit the times maybe when all hope seemed lost. So this is an example of the hero's journey. When you go and you watch a movie and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, sometimes like life is like that. I'm like, is this ever going to get any better? And I can look back on that and grieve that, but also say that, hey, I'm not alone in it. God was there with me. And right now I'm working through this with a band of brothers, and they're going to help pull me out of the pit. And I'm going to pull them out of the pit. And that's why in every movie you see, the hero always has the people around him that help him out, and will encounter the goodness and the presence of God. We'll offer our deepest longings to him, believing that he is what is best. So this is huge. And I just want to pause here. When you talk about SSA, and I think I've longed so much for a best friend, for the father that I never had. I've longed for a God who I could look to and not have to fight the belief that he's disappointed in me. And when I truly believe that he is good, that he loves me, that he's excited for my future and what's next in my life, because he created me uniquely to make a unique mark in the world. And I can actually trust that he doesn't just know what's best, but he is what's best, and he wants to be closer to me. He moves towards me always, even in my sin. And I can truly believe that verse that says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has imagined what God has for those who love him. It's one of my favorites. When we really truly believe that, we can trust him with our deepest desires. Maybe somebody is single and wants to get married to a woman, but they feel like it's so far out of reach. I did my latest podcast episode on that. Maybe we want a band of brothers. We want to be able to enter into that home group and feel like we're not, standing on the sidelines. Maybe we just want to be able to believe something different. Maybe we just want to believe that people are better off when we're around. Please help me to believe that. Help me to make that feel true, God. And the more we can trust him, the better we're going to see our future. But I also just want to acknowledge, man, it's sometimes we've seen God in a way that we believe that he is out to judge us, or we've been communicated that explicitly by well-meaning Christians. And it can take a while to get to a place where we believe that he is good and he has good for us. We'll partner with our Creator to envision our legacy and chart our future, and we will offer that journey of transformation to others. It's really cool. The last week of this coaching course, we write letters to each other just to say, hey, I see this in you. You worked really hard. I remember you talked about this at the beginning of the course, and I've seen you grow in that. We also write a letter to the guy out there that we haven't met yet that is experiencing same-sex attractions, and maybe he's a young man trying to embark on his life and he feels alone and doesn't know what to do. We write a letter to him because we know that God's going to bring that person into our life, and we're going to have the words that we want to say to him. But ultimately, all this is to know Christ more and to make him known. We'll own our identity and live a life of purpose and possibility. That's what I want people to catch. So here's some of the tools that I use in my coaching. And then honestly, talking about an opportunity, I believe that navigating SSA provides a lot of opportunities for growth, connection with other people, connection to God. When we have something as strong as these attractions to do stuff with guys that are not aligned with our values, we have to get really clear on what our values are. When there's confusion in life, that's an opportunity. It's like, hey, I have greater clarity on who I am and where I want to go and how I view myself as somebody created in God's image. And that's a great thing. We can practice courage. Just showing up, sharing my story with somebody requires great courage. But ultimately, again, it's to know Christ and inspiring us to make him known. When I fall, I can fall forward into his arms. When I'm grieving, I can invite his arms to wrap around me. When I feel like all hope is lost, I can say, God, you're going to have to pick me up because I feel like I've gone too far, or I feel like something better is just not possible for me. And then when we truly experience more of his love, more of who we are in him, then we can't help but to want to share that with other people. I believe that's why we're here on earth, is to know Christ and to make him known. I start each of my coaching calls off with that, group coaching calls. It's broken up into the 3 modules. You can look at this on the website if you go to ownyoridentitynow.com/group coaching. But in general, find your voice is more about the present and getting grounded. And then we dive more into the past and our longings, but we pull out what are the beliefs that came out of that? What were the stories that we were telling ourselves that impacted how we show up emotionally, how we show up with other people, how we feel when we walk into a room, what we believe is possible for our life? Those are the things, again, that are really driving our reactions to triggers and our reaction to the future that we want to get more clear on. We want to be able to believe that the future is full of purpose and possibility. So as a part of that, each weekday you have coursework that you go through. It's about 30 to 45 minutes each day. For 12 weeks, we'll have a coaching call with 5 to 7 guys in the group for 2 hours. And then we are on a chat together via an app called Signal. It's 24/7, and we'll respond to part of the work that we've done ourselves on our own in that chat. Get 2 one-on-one coaching sessions, and then any future on your own pace courses, you'll have free access to those. And then I do another type of coaching called high performance coaching that I would love for guys that go through the Own Your Identity group coaching to be able to go into, to kind of take the goals that they've set and really implement them in really strategic and practical ways. So you get a discount off of that. And then, okay, this is priceless, lifetime access to an exclusive community for alumni. We have our own private social network for that. But then what we do as well is get together once a month for 2 hours. And the first hour is just catching up, meeting the new folks. And then I bring in an expert in the SSA or personal development space to come in and speak for the second hour. Okay, so book a free coaching session to apply, whether you sign up for coaching or not. I'd love to hear your story. I know it's hard to talk sometimes about your same-sex attractions. So if you're feeling alone, man, give me a call, set up a call. I'd love to meet you virtually and hear your story and provide some tools for you. Then I have the other free resources. I think most of y'all have been listening to my podcast. I tell you what, it's been so fun to create that. It's been one of the best things that I've done in life. But again, these are all imperfect tools to help unblock you from hearing the voice of God. Christ's words brought the universe into existence. So whatever you do after this call, I want you to remember that Christ spoke worth, identity, and purpose into you. Own it. Okay. And if you email me at hello@jasonmeller.com, I'm going to give you my morning and evening mindset PDF. So thanks everybody for coming today.